Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the best recordings of Shostakovich's Symphony No. 6, a splendid symphony, even though no one quite knows what to make of it. It has only 3 movements, like the Fourth Symphony, a big, huge, dark, brooding adagio, followed by a spiky scherzo and a zippy Rossinian gallop-like finale. It's full of sparkling wit, and those 2 movements seem to be completely unrelated to that huge opening adagio. After Shostakovich rehabilitated, his reputation with the Fifth Symphony, everybody expected him to produce reams of optimistic, triumphant symphonies. But, he was too true to his art to do it. Even though he was able to write in a more listener-friendly idiom, for example, than in Symphonies 2, 3, and 4, he still was experimenting with the form. He was still expressing. This was the kind of guy he was. Dark, sad, tragic emotions juxtaposed with giddy, sardonic. It sounds like Shostakovich. No matter what he did, he could not help sounding like himself. But the Sixth is a bit of a paradox in that it has kind of puzzled commentators. No one actively dislikes it, but no one seems to really like it very much either. I adore the Sixth Symphony. I think it's an absolutely fabulous piece of music, and it's a fascinating study of symphonic unity, because although emotionally it's practically schizophrenic, it's either really, really, really dark or almost giddy and wacky. The fact of the matter is, the entire symphony is thematically interrelated, but you won't hear it on a first run. Believe me, you probably, or maybe a little bit of it. It's like anything else. It rewards repetition, because the more you listen to it, the more integrated and unified and conceptually satisfying the thing will become. And there's just no way around that necessity of having the experience. But I may be able to speed up the process a little bit by giving you some hints. And I assure you, some people ask me, it's like, well, gee, how do you figure out that this is like related to that and all that? You just keep listening. I don't study scores. I have them. I look at them. I read them. I don't look at it and say, well, that looks like that. And, I don't do that. I just listen to it. And if you listen to it enough and you listen to it carefully, it all becomes clear. The wonderful thing about the classics, the wonderful thing about the great composers, is that they are our best teachers. The music explains itself to you as you listen to it. And the more you listen to it, the more you'll understand. I know that sounds, kind of naive, I suppose, but it's the truth. And Shostakovich was a very, very great composer. And moreover, he was a great symphonist. And exactly the same kind of analysis that I would apply to a Haydn symphony to see how the various parts interrelate and create unity in diversity works exactly the same way with a Shostakovich symphony. His technique is essentially a classical technique, as is true of just about all symphonists who know what they're doing, because there are only so many ways you can do this sort of thing, and composers all sort of hit on similar methods, even though they may approach them from very, very different angles or within the context of extremely different stylistic parameters. So, how does this apply to the Sixth Symphony? Well, we are going to take as our exemplar, because it's one of the 7 magnificent performances I have selected as among the best. We've been using Vasily Petrenko with the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic on Naxos, because it's just a magnificent series generally. It doesn't really have any weak links. And the Sixth is terrific. And I want you to hear the opening basic idea. Now, this first adagio it's a huge ABA form, basically. Within each section, there are subsections and all that, but we don't have to get into that. It's an enormous ABA form, and it has 3 principal motives, which are going to play a very, very important role later on in the symphony. And the first 2 are contained in the opening statement. by the strings. And so I'm going to play you that statement. I just want you to hear the whole thing because it's a magnificent paragraph of music. Truly, truly noble and tragic, and it just has immediate expressive depth. It's just glorious. One of the great exordiums that Shostakovich ever wrote. Here it is. Beautiful, isn't it? Heartbreakingly beautiful. Fantastic, fantastic opening. You know something important is going on. And I mean, you'd better, because this movement is in some performances almost 20 minutes long. And that's just the beginning of the symphony. Then the other two are like 5 minutes and 6 minutes. So it's a very, very seemingly unbalanced structure, but it isn't. Anyway, that opening paragraph that I just played you contains two principal ideas, and I've separated them out for you. The first is the opening four notes, do, 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 da, and the other one is the big first full orchestral, da, 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 da. That's all you need to know. Here they are. I separated them out with a pause between them, just so you can get them into your head. Because, I mean, Shostakovich is very kind to his listeners in this symphony. He knows that the form is a little odd, and he repeats these ideas very, very frequently in many different guises, so that you do get them into your head before you hear the rest of the symphony. But I'm going to play them for you, as I said, separated by a pause first, so that you can get a chance to hear them in isolation. Here they are. So that's theme A and theme B, or motive A and motive B, because they're just a little handful of notes. Then there's motive C. Motive C comes from the big middle section of this movement. I remember when I played the middle section, it ends with a Celesta solo, and I played the Celesta. Of course, it's just a two-note trill that goes on for like 20 bars, but I got to do it. I went, and I got to play the tam-tam. Oh, that was really cool too. Just when it's darkest, you hear. Yeah, oh, wow, that was fun. Anyway, let me play you now that strange little motive from the central middle section of the Adagio, which is, let's call it motive C. And that's going to play an important role later as well. Here it is. Tiny little thing. That's all it is. Dum ba dum, dum ba da dum. All you have to remember is just that a little rhythmic pattern followed by a da 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 dum. Just a tiny little. Was it a minor third or something? I don't know. Don't ask me what the intervals are, but it's kind of like that. Just two notes. One repeated and one does do do do. That's it. Just remember that. And that's really all you need to know about the first movement. And the rest of it, you can simply sit back and let it roll over you in all of its darkness and the end, which is mysterious, but also consoling and very, very, very beautiful. And it simply evaporates into nothingness. I think the ending is deliberately unsatisfying. So is the lack of development, in a sense, because the other two movements are going to develop the motives A, B, and C that we've previously heard. And they function almost as the missing development from what you might call the first movement. They are all in the same form. All the movements in this symphony have the same form. It's all A, B, A, in brief. However much stuff happens within each of those A's, B's, or A's. That's what they are. And the last two are quite similar because there's a big climax in the middle of the B section, and then the A section returns, and there's a little coda, and that's like the whole thing. So the scherzo. Now the scherzo, which is the second movement, is based entirely on A. Do, 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 that thing. And Shostakovich treats it two ways. The first way is rhythmically. That is bum, 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 bum. You just have to remember that rhythm. And then the other way is going to be the shape of the melody. That's dum, bum, 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 like this. Something sort of like it looks kind of like a heart monitor chart thing. That's that shape of that melody. Rising, falling, and rising again is going to be important. So the opening of the scherzo, the A section, is based on the rhythm. Bum, 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 bum. And because you hear that opening from the first movement so many times, do, 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 whenever you hear something in that rhythm, you immediately are going to think, that goes back to the beginning of the symphony. So here is the first sort of main theme from the scherzo that Shostakovich is going to toy with a billion different ways, always keeping the same rhythmic shape, whether it's loud, whether it's soft, whether it's in the brass or the strings or however it's colored, and whatever the actual notes are. What matters is the rhythm, and here it is. So that harks back to the opening motive. Then there's a very odd middle section, the B section, the central section of this scherzo. It has a strange melody that goes dum bum bum wham, like that. Dun 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 wah, wah, like that. But the first four notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, exactly the same shape and almost the same notes as dum, bum, 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 but the rhythm is totally different. But the shape of the melody is the same. So here it is when it comes in on the violins. So you can hear the similarity with the opening theme. And I put them next to each other for you so that you can hear them separated by pauses again. And it will give you a good sense of the relationship between the two. That's the middle section of the scherzo, based on motive A from the first movement. I hope you heard that. I think it's pretty clear. And that's how Shostakovich builds its scherzo, builds the scherzo. It's a development of the first motive of the whole symphony. Fascinatingly done, elegant, simple once you know what it is, and endlessly inventive and colorful, and a total transformation. A total transformation in mood, in expressiveness. That's what real symphonists do. They work with their material and they make it mean different things emotionally as they develop it and transform it. Shostakovich was a master at that. Now the finale is a Rossinian gallop, which Shostakovich quotes in his 15th Symphony. He loved that rhythm. He loved that gallop rhythm, and he used it constantly throughout his music. However, The finale is going to work with motives B and C from the first movement. So remember motive C? Bum ba dum, bum ba da dum. Well, that very easily turns into the opening, the finale. Ba da dum, ba da dum, ba da dum, bum bum. That's all it is. And I'm going to play them for you, and I've put them next to each other with a pause separating them so that you can hear how they relate. So here is the opening, the finale, and the motive C from the central part of the opening adagio. And thus we have the thematic material from the finale. Now the finale has the same shape as every other movement, A, B, A, and the B section has a different melody, and that different melody is based on motive B, the second motive. Da, 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 bum, bum, bum. The thing to keep in mind there is simply two groups of rising notes. It's that simple. This is, in the finale, it goes bum, 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 bum. It's if you were to speed up, da, 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 you would get basically the same thing. So one derives from the other. And again, here they are, the original version from the first movement, and then a pause, and then the version that happens in the finale. And you can speed these things up in your head. You'll see. They morph into each other very simply if you just use a little creativity once you get them into your brain and can hum them back to yourself. And so, with those two motives, we have the entire thematic material of the Sixth Symphony. And it's something that just grows on you as it goes. I think it's fascinating. I mean, the first time I heard the Sixth, I think like a lot of people do, that it has this big, long, slow movement, then two totally unrelated quick ones. And that's very, very odd. But you need those two quick ones because each of them treats a different motive from the first movement. The second movement is motive A, the finale is motive C and motive B. And so they have a purpose, a true developmental purpose, and in so doing, Shostakovich completely transforms the expressive message of those original motives into something completely, totally, utterly different. I think it's a miracle of symphonic writing and of emotional expression. Because what we learn from it is that tragedy can be transformed into comedy in the right hands. And of course, Shostakovich was just so great at doing that sort of thing. I don't think anybody probably noticed it when the symphony was first performed. I haven't read many analyses of the symphony where anybody noticed it. But like I said, it's merely a function of familiarity. Familiarity and careful, sympathetic listening, the kind that I know you are willing to do. So let's talk about performances. As I mentioned, there is Petrenko on Naxos. Fabulous, fabulous performance. Absolutely first class with a very good Symphony number 12, which is one of the real problem children amongst the symphonies. So this is worth getting, and if you've got the cycle, you've got it. I also want to say I only have 7 performances of the Sixth. I mean, there's many, many more. There are very few poor versions of it. It tends to be almost performer-proof. It can be dull. I mean, the first movement can be dull. It can be a little hard to hold together, but basically, it almost always comes out well along a wide interpretive spectrum. It really does. So take heart. If I don't mention one that you have and you've got like a complete cycle, chances are you've got a very good Sixth Symphony. I don't know of any Shostakovich cycle where the Sixth Symphony is the weak link. I really don't. They're mostly very, very good. So don't worry. Don't worry at all. So now we have, let's see. Oh, this is a wonderful complete symphony cycle on alto And it has a live sixth with Vladimir Yurovsky and the London Philharmonic. It was on the London Philharmonic's own label, and it's really, really terrific. It's a wonderful live performance, exciting. The audience goes crazy at the end, and they should. Fabulous performance, really well recorded. I mean, you hear so much transparency of texture and different layering, and the balances are great. It's really good. So that was a big surprise, and I'm very happy to recommend it. Also fabulous is this one from the Bis Complete cycle, and I mention it separately because I think the cycle deserves a shout out. This is Mark Wigglesworth. In this case, he's with the BBC National Orchestra of Wales, and you get symphonies 5, 6, and 10, and these are really good performances of all three symphonies. Now, I don't know if this twofer is still available or you have to buy the whole box, but it's terrific. First class in every respect, and definitely worth having. If you're going to sample this cycle, get this to start. Get this 5, 6, and 10. You'll be very, very happy with it. Next, yes, Leonard Bernstein, his first recording on Sony with the New York Philharmonic. Now, Bernstein's approach to this symphony is very, very different from just about everybody else. It's quite wonderful. The second movement he takes very slowly, surprisingly slowly. It's not like droopy slow, but it's deliberate so that he can be very quick in the finale. And so the symphony speeds up as it goes. It's a very smart way to approach it, I think. And it works wonderfully well. But this is the performance to get, the New York Philharmonic one, because Bernstein did a remake on Deutsche Grammophon with the Vienna Philharmonic, and basically it's not very good. I mean, the orchestra sounds terribly uncomfortable. It's not well recorded. It's heavier, and it's basically the same interpretation, but just less convincing. And in the finale, at the very end, the cymbal player comes in a bar early in the very last pages, right where you don't want him to. It's really bad. Some people also add a bass drum thwap at the very end, even though Shostakovich didn't write one. Doesn't matter whether it's there or not. I don't think it's necessary. I like the way the symphony sort of just stops. It gets cut off. So a bass drum adds a certain finality that Shostakovich was more than capable of indicating, if that's what he wanted. But Bernstein's second version is just not that great. It's that simple. And he's a wonderful Shostakovich conductor. But those live things, sometimes they work, sometimes they didn't. And this was a didn't. So leave it at that. Now here's a real sleeper, a total sleeper. I think this is a wonderful performance. I don't know if it's still available. I think it is, or you'll be able to find it easily. This is from the complete cycle with Oleg Kaitani on the Arts label, on Arts Music, and it's Symphonies 5 and 6, and they're great performances. And it's not just even the performances are so great, they are amazingly vividly recorded. This is one of those engineering jobs where it just seemed to be perfectly done. And it is thrilling. I mean, you crank this sucker up and you'll have your neighbors begging for mercy. It's just fantastic. It's with the Orchestra Sinfonica di Milano Giuseppe Verdi. Yay! I wish they'd have short names. Whatever happened to the Milan Philharmonic? I mean, come on, guys. Anyway, I'm not going there. This is wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And as you know, Oleg Kaitani was Igor Markevich's son. So, yeah, something of the dad shows up in this particular version of 5 and 6. It's just a great record. I love it. Also, quite marvelous in its way is Kurt Sanderling. You can always count on Sanderling to conduct Shostakovich's sardonic music with a wonderful bitter edge. And, when you hear the finale, those who think that the finale is simply light and frivolous and that it somehow, isn't supported by the rest of the symphony, or it doesn't belong with the rest of the symphony, Sanderling is the guy to listen to, because he was so serious about everything that he did. And even music that's outwardly comical or grotesque, he manages to give a certain weight and darkness and intensity without being slow and droopy and lumbering, or none of those things. It's all authentic Shostakovich, but it's done with an intent and a purpose that leads you to believe that even when the music is being funny, there are some deadly serious issues at stake. This is on Berlin Classics. It's a marvelous performance. The first is excellent, too. It's a terrific disc. Absolutely terrific. However, I have to pick one. And the one I'm going to pick is Berglund. I mean, it's been reissued many different times since this packaging. It's been in a twofer. It's in a Berglund box. It's in various places. But his sixth was marvelous for a couple of reasons. Number one was the incredible darkness of the first movement, which was very slow, surprisingly much slower than like Kondrashin or anyone else was doing it. It's how long is it here? I have a timing, I think here. Yeah, actually 17 minutes and 36 seconds. At the time, that was very slow. Since then, 18 minutes, 20 minutes is not unusual in this slow movement. But Berglund's now, rehearing it after all these years, that slow one, it just sounds presciently perfect. This is exactly the tempo it should go at. And then the scherzo was very, very quick. Just the opposite of Bernstein's. Very fast, very virtuosic, incredibly exciting. And this was one of those vintage, late EMI recordings before digital awfulness came in. And they fixed it, the digital awfulness eventually. But initially, all those digital recordings sounded just dreadful. This is fabulous. Vintage EMI sonics. I remember everyone wanting the imports of these performances because, Angel's pressings in the U.S. were just so disgusting. You'd play them once and you could never listen to them again. But on those imported pressings, the British pressings on heavy vinyl, my God, they sounded terrific. And then, so the last two movements are just slamming, fast and rhythmic and pointed and full of edgy intensity. And the first movement is now, in retrospect, the absolutely ideal tempo. When it came out, this immediately became the reference version. And in so many respects, I think it still is. It's just amazing. Fabulously well played by the Bournemouth Symphony. And Berglund was great in this music. Absolutely great. Probably because he paid so much attention to characterful phrasing and rhythm, which is so, so important in keeping this music moving. So that is my pick for the Shostakovich Sixth Symphony. I hope that this discussion has helped you clarify the music's form and overall structure in your mind, and that at least some of these recommendations may have taken you a little bit by surprise, and that you'll sample some and really get into this piece. It's just great. So keep on listening, folks, and thank you so much for joining me. Take care.